Dr. Mitnaul,
Thank
welcome.
you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited for this conversation, Tanya.
Yeah, I'm so excited. I've actually been following you for a while. Here's some confessions on
Okay.
Instagram. And I love you. It's just that your reels are so jam-packed with not only tools but fun. You're
Thank
fun,
you.
which I think just sets you apart from everybody
Thank
else.
you. Thank you. I try, I get some feedback, thankfully, in real time from some of the parents and families that come and see me as well. And so I'm often asking them, did I go too far or am I hurting anyone's feelings? But no, I'm grateful to be in that space because certainly it allows me to hopefully encounter people that otherwise wouldn't walk through the doors, of my office. Yeah.
Totally. I think you just take away all of the fear and kind of stuffiness around people thinking, oh, I have to talk to a psychiatrist or a professional. It can feel really scary. And with you, all of that is
Yeah,
gone.
thank you, thank you, and I think there's something approachable about that medium, and I think that's been part of. I attribute that to part of the momentum too with young people. They'll go out to a restaurant. I feel like 5, 10 years ago, no one wanted to say, "Hey, that's my psychiatrist," and I see him on whatever. But now, I mean, they are just as happy. So I still play it cool, but and I think that that barrier has been dropped, and I think that's a healthy thing. I think for parents, though, it can still be hard, right? Hard to have those
Totally.
types of conversations or feel comfortable. It's still a little bit easier to talk about, your child in the hospital for, a broken leg than for depression or anxiety related reasons. And so
Absolutely.
anyway, I'm grateful to be in that space. And so thank you for the feedback that it feels kind of approachable, and that it's okay for us to, talk about the emotional lives of kids and how we can help them and parent them through this interesting time.
Beautiful. And that's exactly what I want to talk to you about today, this interesting
Yeah.
time. So, as a parent, psychiatrist, social media content
Yeah.
creator, you're in this really unique position where you can connect with people
Yeah.
differently. And your work around families and technology has been particularly interesting to me.
Thank you.
So, what I'm curious about is with all of these different roles that you play, the different hats
Yes.
in your life, how does that shift how you guide parents in terms of
Sure. One,
technology?
I think, certainly being a parent makes you humble, that a lot of your really great ideas in
Yes.
terms of implementation can be a struggle to do in real time, even when you think you know
I
the
hear you.
answers, right? And so certainly that has an effect, and it gives me opportunities certainly to practice what I preach. But I think the other part is, the world of social media really does involve psychology actually in terms of crafting a message and hoping to find it effective. How do you reach the people that you really want to reach and hopefully affect a positive change in their life? And so in some ways the role of trying to be an influencer is not too uncommon from the role of actually being a parent. I mean, we have
Hmm.
by and large 18 summers to try to influence the life of this young person that we're entrusted with. And so it can be really, really tricky and hard to do, sometimes frustrating, sometimes beautiful and absolutely wonderful and hilarious. All those things we kind of encounter too in the social media landscape. And because our kids inhabit a lot of time, in that landscape too, that it
Mm.
can be a challenge as a clinician, even to, how do I reach parents? Or how do we implement the strategies that we know are evidence based and helpful. But often the strategies don't assume that we live in a time in which your child's biggest influencer might be Mr. Beast, who has 8 million YouTube followers, and isn't necessarily
Yeah,
the other sage or wise adult that you call a friend in your life. And so I
absolutely.
think that hopefully I think that's part of my perhaps unique perspective is that I because I'm having to think with the mind of the algorithm to make things work, I'm also seeing both how it is that kids and adult brains are kind of attracted to it, and then also the extra work I think that parents have to be mindful of, or that can be helpful in the heart of their children.
What I love what you're saying there is that we are using technology as a really positive tool,
Yes.
as you are, but that we also obviously need to be careful.
Yes.
I think Dr. Mitnaul, I'm a mom too. I've got two little
Okay.
girls,
You know.
and I think just like any other parent in the
Yeah.
world, I want to be their anchor. I
Sure.
want to be their influencer.
Yeah.
But as you're saying, we're now up against so
There is.
much.
There really is. And so, and we take some of those things for granted. So it's not just, hairstyle, but I often will hear, words and verbiage that, yeah, even if, I'll have parents say to me, my child goes to this, private school where all the kids kind of think, similarly, or at least come from similar backgrounds. Where did they get, X, Y, and Z information about life or relationships, or just where did they develop some of those interests? And so it really is strong. And now we actually are at the stage, at this really great stage of understanding the brain and some of the shaping realities of what that does in terms of our kids' ability to kind of make decisions, or even some of their moral judgment, how that can be influenced by the things that they see and hear on these platforms. And I think as parents, certainly personally, I wouldn't have known how significant that could be. But certainly it's a theme that I'm sure many people hear in their offices all the time, and certainly that parents battle with day by day, including myself. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So Dr. Mitnall, really what you're saying there is not only is it shifting relational power within families, but it's also shifting what the brain looks
That's
like in
right.
our children because they're spending more and more time on
That's
devices.
right. And so I think the devices and social media can be a helpful tool, but they can also be competitive. And I think often when it's a competitive relationship, that's where the family dynamic tends to suffer, and our relationship with our children tend to suffer as well. And so I'll give you, as an example, all of us as parents are guilty of some amount of distracted parenting. Where our attention is split, and so maybe we miss out on some subtle cues. So perhaps by also trying to check my email and hear my daughter relive, all of her experiences from her day in kindergarten, I'm missing an opportunity to clue into, tone or inflection, or to hear in that joy. But your voice kind of lilted at the end of that second phrase when you mentioned your best friend, Sally. Can you tell me what's going on there, right? And so I think the influence is also bi-directional as well. That in terms of our parental awareness, and it isn't to finger wag at parents too, but I think bi-directionally, there are some things going on too that often kind of frustrate our abilities to be as present to one another. And so there are some ways, or some, it's important for us, I think, in this time especially, to really think conscientiously and intentionally about, how do we encourage parents to kind of recognize that? How do we recognize that in ourselves as well?
And it's interesting, actually, when I work in clinic, I give parents a very similar message that we need to start with ourselves first.
Yes.
Because if we don't shift our own habits, there's no ways that our kids are going to do it. So
There's no
maybe
way.
the short term, everybody will put
Yes.
away their phones. But if
Right.
mom and dad are still on their phones at bedtime and life is stressful, sometimes parents need that time.
That's right.
But if mom and dad don't shift their patterns, there's no ways the kids are going to shift their patterns long
That's
term.
right. That's right. And so, what often happens is, just as you're saying, it sometimes if we were to, take a 10,000-foot view of kind of the way that our life is organized, it would seem that the main sources for pleasure, entertainment, all those things have to be kind of mediated through the device. And I think there's a subtle playing out of what happens in that relationship, that we can kind of take for granted. And so you're absolutely right. I think, in encouraging parents, one, to begin with themselves, and then also kind of looking for how do we fill the space, especially for our teenagers, right? Everyone is
Mm-hmm.
scared of the big B word, which is boredom. And so once you say, hey guys, I think you would benefit from limiting the screen and kind of tech time, the real challenge actually begins there, which is how do we fill that space that was previously occupied, by our devices. And so that too causes shifts within the family. as well, as they work to kind of accommodate that, especially in teenagers.
Hmm. So that filling of the space.
Yeah.
So we're looking at how do we come back together as a relational entity, as a
Yes.
family. When you've worked with families, what do they look at in terms of filling the space? What
Yes.
things come up?
Yeah, so one is often families, we have to reclaim kind of a ritual of habit around how we spend our free time and what free time looks like. And so to help families, sometimes, I might lead in with remember life in the 80s or remember life in the 90s or 70s if you're, just go back to a prior decade and try to remind yourself of either what family looked like for you or what your experience of family was, to remember how did we occupy ourselves. And I think often that becomes kind of at least an initial jumping off point for thinking or rethinking about, right, we had great times, building a race car ramp with paper towel tubes and all the creative things that our minds were kind of given over to, in the
Mm-hmm.
absence of other stimulus that is really powerful and often kind of demands your attention. So that's probably one of the beginning starting points too, is just how do we set up the expectation of fun, kind of collaborative things that we can do together that don't necessarily involve a screen, and then trying to be proactive about making that a part of our family life ritual and routine as well. So that hopefully becomes a part where we're not fighting against the technology. We're preserving this really great, tradition or habit that we're setting up in our own homes.
Oh, I love that. I love that. So we bring the power back to the family.
Yes.
Yeah, one of the things that I always say at the Institute is our issue at the Institute is not necessarily with technology itself. We're living
Right.
in a technological world.
Yeah.
It's the balance. So we've
Hmm.
almost forgotten how to fill our cups. So
Right.
what about sleep, exercise,
Yes.
Sunday family dinners without
Right.
phones? It's those things that
Yes.
we lose when
Yes.
everybody is out with a phone.
That's right. That's right. And so sometimes that requires some digging too, to remember or reclaim the things that previously brought us and our children, joy. The number of kids who I will say this in jest, and then they say, actually, this is me. Where's that dusty Casio keyboard that you got 2 Christmases ago? Is it collecting dust in your closet, or have you used it in a while? And often they'll say, they'll chuckle to themselves and say, yeah, well, I have a ukulele, or whatever that is. There have been some passions that now seem kind of long forgotten, that could be breathed into and given life again. And so I like what you said too about not looking at technology as this thing that must be demonized and set on fire, and that we should all go back to living on the prairie and having no Wi-Fi. While sometimes I'm tempted, right, to
Hmm.
want to be
Me
that
too.
that drastic. But part of it too, I think, in helping our kids is reshaping our technology as a tool rather than the thing to be enjoyed kind of in and of itself. And so again, just being silly with teens, I'm often like, well, if you enjoyed, I don't know, doing housework and then went to bed with your mop and talked to it and carried it with you everywhere, I'd say that's an unhealthy connection.
I love that. I love that.
So that they can see, and right, that does sound weird and kind of unhealthy. Okay, and so
Got it.
what is it that your phone is for? Oh, well, to connect with friends. Okay, so do you need it every minute of the day? I don't really need it. Okay, so how do we turn that into using it as a tool for connection, as a tool for learning, as a tool um, for exploring the world, that doesn't become an end in and of itself. Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Dr. Mitnaul, in your practice, do you see a link between anxiety and depression and screen use?
Definitely, and in this way. So Not to say that, because you have a screen that you are, destined to, to experience a depressive episode or struggle with, generalized anxiety or panic disorder. But for kiddos who do maybe have a vulnerability or susceptibility to these things, and actually even in neurotypical kids, my experience is, when life is overinvested in those things as kind of the primary good, often that does produce trouble of some kind. And certainly I've seen it heighten anxiety and depressive symptoms in kids, especially when, within the life of the family, maybe they'd slipped into a pattern of really, really unrestricted kind of access, ad libitum to the technology, and it's such that, it's their main kind of coping strategy, right? And so for anxiety, for instance, often we're kind of working through a hierarchy of exposure. Well, one of the things that often kind of cuts off our ability to kind of get to the next level is using the technology as avoidance for doing, task one or task
Yes.
two or task three, right? And so I do see those things as linked, and I wouldn't be surprised that in the coming years that we, continue to kind of mine this and better understand its impact on the developing brain and the sensitivities to depressive and anxious disorders. Yeah.
Hmm. So as we look at those developing brains and those sensitivities and
Yeah.
vulnerabilities, this is a hard question that I'm about to
Sure.
ask you.
Okay. Good.
In your opinion, when should kids get access to a phone?
Yes. All right. So here's some of my this is my primary, not randomized controlled trial, opinion or kind of guidance around it. One is, if parents are discerning this, one is maturity in their child. So recognizing the pattern of behaviors that they engage in kind of interpersonally. So for kiddos that I know that maybe are already struggling emotionally, that maybe their ability to have these really explosive moments are fairly frequent within the life of the family, then that child is indicating to me that they're not quite ready emotionally for the frustration that will inherently come from someone not returning a text on time, or in a timely way, or being frustrated with the outcome of a particular game, or not being included by friends, where things could really turn or escalate pretty wildly. The other is, I think, the question of, what is the primary, use and need for this, particular child. And so I'm not a fan of, just offering the phone as a, you've reached this particular age and therefore, you have kind of earned this right, but rather, what are the situations and circumstances that you really need this tool? Is it to coordinate your schedule? Is it to, because you're, driving or spending time away, or maybe you're between two homes and you need access to both, parents, and so those are maybe some of the main things that I'm kind of evaluating or encouraging people to think about before saying yes to a phone.
Mm.
And I should add this: even when parents are discerning, okay, I am saying yes, it's not unrestricted, and perhaps not without safeguards around its use too, because we know that even kids who are wanting to do the right or the best thing or use it appropriately, there are things that pop up even beyond their control that they might not be prepared for or to experience. And so us being cognizant of that and trying to measure that out for our kids is really important too, in my opinion.
Mm, mm. I
Yeah.
love that. It's a really mindful, thoughtful approach, because everyone's always trying to find an age. So I think there's
Yes.
actually
Right.
there's a movement in the States called Wait Until Eighth,
Yes.
which is wait until eighth grade to get the phone, which I actually kind of like because it pushes parents later and later. But
Yes.
it's not
Yeah.
that they all have to be eighth grade, not that they all have to be 13, but rather, who is your child? What do they
That's
need
right.
right now?
That's right. And I think and my hope is with that parents feel empowered to really take each child kind of individually, because their
Mm,
needs are so diverse, and so I think once there is kind of an expectation this is just, handed over, then I think that can lead to a lot of heartache and hardship. Now, having said that, I have, my wife and I have five kiddos biologically. We have an adoptive, young guy who's 1 year old. So even having a teenager with whom we kind of talk about these things openly, it can still be a struggle, especially if parents are determining we're trying to swim a little bit more, we're delaying a little bit more than maybe other peers, and the pressure is really strong to, try to get them, or trying to jump right into the technology sooner than maybe we think they're ready for.
Hmm. Hmm. And with 5 kids, already in your approach, I'm hearing you're not just going to get it because your sister got it or your brother got
Right.
it.
That's right. That's right. That's right. There are some things you must show, or some things to demonstrate. And again, not because we're mean ogres, although it might feel that way, but actually it's because we love you, and we want what's best for you. And again, that's a hard song to sing, and there are some ways to maybe communicate that to your child, that allow you to be in alliance together around finding the right tone and temperature for technology, and how it's being used at home.
Hmm. Hmm. So it really is an authoritative approach. So
Yes,
we're putting those limits in place, but we're going to talk to you about it, and we can
that's
discuss this
right.
together.
That's right. You're right. It's not just an unknown, or a fiat that at some point I may say, but no, I think I think the human brain is kind of wired to to play the game. I mean, these kiddos even more than previous generations perhaps, and so knowing the rules, knowing the way that you can kind of advance in the game, actually can be a healthy way the right types of habits and virtues that you're
Hmm.
hoping to see. So if chores and and being responsible around your grades, and that might not be straight A's, that might just mean maximum effort, and being kind and respectable to your peers and to your teachers. All right, those are the elements that we need to see. And then there might even be a provisional period in which I mean, you get it for these segmented portions of the day, or in these opportunities, and then we kind of evaluate. All right, how well are you doing in those test cases to help us to know how much further we can expand kind of independence around it. And so sometimes with the teens in my office, I'll explain, our goal for you is optimum freedom, right? So at the top of this is a car, a house, I mean, all the finer things that you want in life. But we would never give those to an infant. Why? Because an infant can't use them well, right? So we always stagger the rewards with the responsibility to handle those things. And the
Hmm.
cell phone is among those things too. That I want you to be connected. I want you to have access to this knowledge. There's a level of responsibility too that we need to see, to be sure that it's a blessing and something great for you, rather than something that is potentially destructive.
Oh, I love it. Just brings all parties to the table.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yes,
So
Dr. Mitnaul, if you were, because we're going to finish off here, if we were to leave parents with one
mhm.
do when it comes to technology and one don't when it comes to technology, what would it be?
Okay. One do is maybe to double down on the connection and relationship piece. Even before setting limits, even before, but making kind of the conscientious determination that we're gonna invest in maybe a few more family dinners during the week, or maybe one kind of special event that we do together. Often because I think that currency of love is what allows us to endure hard things, but also ask hard things of one another. And so if we haven't kind of adequately invested in that, it makes anything else that we try to do, whether it's for their good or not, really hard to pull off. And so I guess that match my biggest don't, which is to go through and snatch everything and turn it all all off, without
Yeah.
really a conversation of the type of family life that we're trying to bring about, and the type of gifts and virtues that we're trying to encourage in each of the children that we have in our home. Again, Sally, because of your how great you are at at the arts, and I see that is something that really kind of lights you up. um, I think it's going to be important for us to organize our family in a way that allows those gifts to really shine. And I don't want other things kind of competing with, opportunities for you to experience those things or to thrive in those things. And I think that can be the beginning of a great
I
conversation.
love that. It all comes back to values, doesn't it?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, it really does. It
Yeah.
really does. Yeah.
Dr. Mitnell, if our listeners want to find you, where can they find you?
So thankfully, if you just search at Dr. Mitnaul on pretty much any of the major platforms, you'll find me. You'll find me there, acting goofy and hopefully encouraging you as parents to be, confident and hopefully bringing you some extra knowledge.
So much fun and so wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Mitnell.
Thank you so much, Tanya. Yeah.